It's Don here from The Board. Thanks for coming along and checking out another one of our videos. So a couple of days ago, as part of a live stream on the weekend here, I did a video showing how I create silicone molds. Now, the silicone mold process is very simple, but I do it slightly differently to how other people do it, especially since I don't have a pressure pot. So it's primarily a gravity cast style of mold. I went through how I build my mold box and then how I mix, double mix and pour, as well as how I just sort of settle it down and get the air out, tap it, blow on bubbles and so forth. Now, the material that I normally use is Craft Sil. It's a locally rebranded product. It's just a two-part moisture cured, I think it's a tin cured type of silicone. It's very simple, but it has a very long cure time of 24 hours at 25 degrees C. Now, because it's winter here and my residence doesn't really hit 25 C for most part during winter, it does actually take a little bit longer, so I've left it for 2 days instead. Now, one of the characteristics that you can tell when the silicone has cured, besides the fact that it's not running and pouring everywhere, is when you actually touch the surface, it's not tacky. When you touch it and it's still tacky, but if it doesn't lift and it's not leaving prints behind, it's almost cured, but it should have a very sort of glossy finish, which you can kind of see here with that reflection. But when you touch it, it should definitely not feel sort of tacky at all, like sticky tape kind of feeling, which right now this doesn't. So it's pretty much cured, at least on this top surface. Because the silicone, of course, has quite a bit of thickness and density to it, and if you've done your mixing evenly, you hope that it has made it all the way through and it's completely cured. But I have had previously, before I started doing double mixing, where some of my pours were not completely cured inside and there was still sort of soft sticky spots, and that's always something that you need to be aware of and be prepared for that if you don't do double mixing. So we're going to bust this out. We're going to see how the mold did, and if it's sort of captured the details, as well as if it's destroyed the master, which was sculpted onto the Synth 2.0. Of course, one of the things that I did talk about in regards to when I did this molding was that I don't use release agent. So if it doesn't come off cleanly and it's ripping bits off the master, that's a reason for it, as well as the fact that it was very fine detail with the actual mustache. So it would not surprise me at all if it kept some of that in the mold, which then we would just have to be very careful in cleaning that out of the mold. So first and foremost, we're just going to get rid of this tape. And I talked about how when I use the Lego, it doesn't matter that I don't seal the Lego because the silicone doesn't get through the actual taping. And you can see, at least from that side, none of the silicone actually made it through, which is pretty cool. On that side, it doesn't look like any made it through. So it seems like it's kind of held in pretty well. I did say during the process that I used to put Vaseline on the inside of the actual mold box to prevent it from coming through, but then I'd have to wash it and clean it, and it just wasn't worth the effort. By putting the tape around it, I've never had an issue with the silicone getting out, and it's pretty clean all sides round. Just going to take away that last bit there, and yeah, that's just old stuff. Now on the underside, you can see where it's actually seeped a little bit through. So that's obviously seeped in through that bottom edge, but it hasn't actually made it any further, and same as well on that side there too. But overall, I think my placement was pretty good. It was just by eye to try and center it with a bit of a boundary, and that turned out all right. So, yeah, doesn't seem like it's leaked through most holes. There was a bit that's come through that sprue hole, so we'll see how that particularly turns out once we get that out. Alright, time to de-Lego this. Now there is actually a tool that came with this Lego set for popping off difficult Legos, but I don't have that with me. Not that I anticipate that I need it. And you can see straight away there, the silicone did actually make it in between those bricks. But as you can see, it hit the edge where the tape was and went no further. So it's coming off pretty well. No release material required for the ABS because it's relatively non-reactive, and silicone, once cured, is also quite easy material to remove and demold. You can see how well it's holding on to the actual detail from within the bricks too. Now, I'm not suggesting that you go and silicone mold Legos, but I suppose there's nothing to stop you if you really wanted to, except maybe a lawsuit if you tried to do it commercially and sell it, since your mold would also say Lego on top. But I'm not suggesting you do that. Halfway through, and now we can just break off the big pieces just like that on the surface. There we go. So now at this point in time, that's what the overall mold looks like. Sure, it's got some bits, taggy bits that are hanging around. Does it matter? No. Does it affect its performance? No. It's just purely a cosmetic thing. And if you really wanted to, you could just take some scissors and trim that up, which I probably will do at a later stage. But let's not get into that right now. So we start just by gently pulling on the edges, and you can see how it's just cleanly separating from the synth, which is always a good sign. Nice even mixing is cured well. Just pulling that away, breaking that seal, and then now let's try and pop out the actual mold. Okay. Just trying to do that carefully so I don't make sudden ripping movements. And it looks pretty good. So there they are, separated. Now if I hold that up for the camera to try and focus on. There we go. You can still see that the majority of my actual detail is preserved. Doesn't look like it's ripped any massive chunks out. And I do attribute that to the really great holding qualities of the CX5. Because this is a mix of both the hard and soft, about 75% soft and 25% hard, it does actually retain its features quite well. And if we actually look inside the mold, it has pulled out very small pieces. So let's just bring that up, see if we can get that. So you can see all that fuzziness, and it's got all those little gray bits. All those little gray bits are actually very small pieces of the CX5 that has come out in the mold. But more importantly though is my channels. So I've got very, very fine sprue channels. Now you'll notice in my synth, the way that I've done it, it's recommended that you actually use Q-tips into the actual sprue holes and run them up, and you end up with these sort of half bits, sort of half cylinders that come up through the synth, through these side bits, and they will connect to the actual mold, to the sculpt itself, and that will give you a good sprue channel. I have found previously that I don't need that full sprue because my actual resins are relatively slow to cure, so they've got plenty of time to actually escape through the sprue hole. So I only fill them flush with the actual base, which gives me a half cylinder but on the inside. But as you can see, I've sort of filled in through the back there, and what that gives you is a relatively straight edge of the mold. There's a little bit of sort of indentation around that. You can see here on the bottom there's a couple of sort of chunk bits, but if you did use the Q-tip style, you would have much more of a rounder cylinder there available to you. So I think that's been a pretty successful molding. The next step, of course, is to do an actual cast, and that first cast is going to be unique in a way that it's a cleaning out cast. What I mean by that is with the resin going in and gently filling in all those detailed spots, it's going to bind to those little bits of gray CX5 that are left behind in my mold. And so when I pull it out, hopefully it'll take those bits with it and it'll clean up the actual mold. The danger, of course, of having a very soft silicon, this is relatively low hardness silicon. There's pros and cons, of course. The pros that it captures detail amazingly well, and it's easy to manipulate and move and de-mold, right? Because you can see I can stretch that. But the downside is it also tears a lot easier. So if you have stuff that is very grabby in regards to the detail that it's contouring the resin around, when you de-mold, you have to be very careful. Otherwise, you're going to be pulling and breaking your mold. So hopefully when I do that cleaning cast, it's not going to break the mold, and then subsequent casts into the future, it's going to retain the mold well. So yeah, I'm not sure when I'm going to do that. If I've got opportunity to, I might do a live stream for it. If not, then it's just going to have to be a video that you get to chill out and watch. So we'll see how that goes, and then we can start getting into actual casting. When we do the casting bit though, I will talk about it more in that, but I may actually do another mold because I've got 2 synths. What that will allow me to do is I can compare my same casting process with the old 1.2 synth, the steel one, and with the 2.0 aluminium one, and we can see if my method works with the old one better or the new one better or about the same. And yeah, it'll be cool to do. So I think that's pretty much a wrap. And of course, to explain why I wouldn't necessarily cast a new mold off this again is because some of those details that came off in here means if I cast the second mold with this, they're actually going to be slightly different. What does that mean? Not much, because it doesn't look like it's drastically affected the appearance of the cap. But if you ideally want identicals, you would just use one mold. But we'll cover off casting in the next video when I actually do the casting bit. So there you go. Now, if you haven't seen the other video already, we've actually hit 700 subscribers. So we're running that Gleam IO competition web pagey methubi where you have 2 entries, one for staying subscribed to our channel. If you haven't subscribed, of course, subscribe, and you'll be in the draw to win the 2016 red-nosed mo, which is chilling out in here. And the other one, of course, is going over and checking out Idea23's Instagram. So with Idea23, you're going to get an awesome cap at great prices. And I thought I'd just throw that out anyway, as I've said in the other video, because they've come aboard and they're helping sponsor our podcast hosting costs, which is fantastic. So that's a wrap, I think. Hope you have a great week. For those people in Sydney, stay dry because it's raining quite a bit now, and it's going to be a cool week as well. Don't catch a cold. And yeah, I think I'm done for the moment. So until next time, happy clacking.